This is so special to me and also feels like a very full circle moment. You and I met, gosh, like 8 or 9 years ago at this
Yes.
point, we were working together in LA for a very special jewelry accessories company. And now looking back, like that feels like lifetimes ago. And also still feels like so close. Like I still hold a lot of those memories so close. I'm so glad that you're here. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you.
Same here. Yeah. And when we reconnected, what was that? A few months ago, I completely echo what you said around multiple versions of our lives have come and gone in the last 8 years, but the essence of who we are has only been shining brighter since
Mm.
then. And so there's still so much soft, warm, tender, gooey feelings in my heart for you and like for those moments that were so pivotal, I think, in shaping how I relate to people of all kinds. You know, the people I meet on the street, my family, my coworkers. That was a really special time.
Yeah, it was. And there's so many moments that stick out for me. And as I was, thinking about seeing your face today and where we were gonna go, this like very beautiful memory popped into my mind. And I don't even know if you like fully remember this, but it was at the end of our time at that company together. I think you had like just left and I was getting ready to leave, and you and I met for coffee, and we were sitting outside in the arts district of Los Angeles drinking coffee together, and you said something to me that like just really left an imprint. And just as someone that like I looked up to and respected and admired in so many ways, like you basically told me in so many words that like you are going to do so much more. Like there is so much more coming for you, and you are destined to be doing more. And those words, like I'll never forget. And just the power of like somebody that you love and trust and respect to believe in you and
Mm.
to shine that light on you, especially when you're in the midst of, because I was leaving that company and I wasn't really sure like where I was going to go next or what was coming next for me. But to have somebody like reflect that back into you, there's so much power in that. And so I don't know, like that came to mind, and it's something that like I wanted to share because I really think that you are this like phenomenal communicator, and you have this ability to see people beyond what is just like shown on the external and what's shown on the surface. Like you really can see into the depths of somebody and like help them even see things that maybe they don't see themselves. And so I mean, there's so many places I really want to go, but like, I would love to know, like, where does that come from? Like, were you always that child? Like, I know you grew up in a really small town.
Ah,
Share some of like, take me back to like where some of that like just beauty for like really seeing people comes from.
well, thank you for remembering that moment. As you reflected that back to me, I was like, of course, anyone would say that to you, Diera, because it just like was radiating off of you. So I guess it just felt like a very obvious statement, but it's a good reminder that we can't see ourselves the way that other people do, and we need relationships as mirrors for us. And one of my teachers talks about how each person we meet is a mirror, and some are light mirrors, meaning they reflect back to us things we love and they make us feel a certain way and they remind us that we're funny or that we're smart. And then other people are shadow mirrors where there's just something that's so triggering. And it's like, well, what in me is being triggered, let's say, by that person's lack of boundaries or by that person's, like, I don't know if they're gossiping or whatever it is. And then some people are neutral mirrors, which I thought was interesting. And that just means that It's the person when you're in a crowd that you can't remember their name, you can barely remember what they look like, and it's almost like they didn't register. And that there's something to be noted or aware of when we meet people, like which mirror they are for us. So you are a light mirror for me in every way. And I guess to answer your question, I was raised in a very small town. I don't know, small for me, 40,000 people, not small for other folks, but in Kansas, and in a very conservative environment where I didn't have much exposure to pop culture or media. I think about things like the arts or uh, history. Even it was all very kind of single focused and a very like religious home. And the beautiful thing about that was that going to church 3 to 4 times a week means that you have to be friends with the people who show up. And looking back now, if I wasn't going there 4 times a week, I don't know if those people would have been the people I'd have gravitated towards in school when you kind of click up. But we had like a motley crew of people, and the point was just to like love each other and to like serve and support each other. And I think that really cultivated a lot within me. As well as, until the 8th grade, my best friend was Amish because I went to a very small school. And so I've always loved being friends with people who are different thinkers and operate maybe completely like differently than I do in the world. And so our friendship is like one of my peak. Yeah, I just look back on it with fondness because it's kind of unlikely now, and especially in an age of cell phones and so much kind of indoctrination about who your people are and they're not my people and I'm an individual. It's very community oriented, the environment that I was raised in. And it's really boring in Kansas, meaning you don't have the beach, you don't have the mountains, you don't have a lot of concerts. So you just have to make your own fun. So this love of like spinning up and random Wednesday night, like a milkshake contest in my friend's basement for 20 high schoolers, like silly, but I can see the roots of what I'm doing now in those casual evenings spent together.
That makes so much sense. And
Yeah.
something I did not know about you. And yeah, there's so much beauty in and pretty unique like to you and to your childhood and to your experience because we do gravitate towards the people that look and act and behave the same way that we do, and I've really come to believe that that's very limiting because we're surrounding ourselves with people that likely think the same way we do, believe the same things that we do, and so we're in this like sort of tunnel vision world of existence where we're not challenged and we're not pushed and we're not, you know, asked to expand our thoughts or have a little bit more compassion for somebody that may look differently than we do. And that certainly was my experience. And it's taken time to unravel a lot of that behavior. And I still catch myself because I'm a human being where I'm like, why am I judging that other person? Because at the end of the day, like there's so much sameness. And this is like what I've found in the beauty of just traveling to other places, surrounding yourself with people that are so different from you, is like the sameness exists everywhere, no matter where you go. We're so similar inside, but we have these like meat suits that protect us from dropping those walls and really getting to know somebody. And so, yeah, I love also what you said about relationships being mirrors and reflecting back into us certain things like mirror. I've never heard that, a neutral mirror. That's like very fascinating to me, and you as
I
well,
know.
like are such a light mirror. And I I notice how people just gravitate towards you. Like you're a very magnetic person because you are so open, because you are like there, it doesn't feel like there's any sort of judgment. You're very inclusive. You really do like bring people in. And as I said before, like you see people beneath all of this stuff. And and I know that like you and I mean, while we had, very different pasts, there's like a lot of similarities in how we got to the place that we're in today. Like when we met, you were married. And I think like I'll speak for myself, but I would love to know if this like feels true for you too, that like I lived a lot of my life like doing the things that I thought I was supposed to be doing. Like go to college, get a job, find a man, be in a relationship, get married, have babies. And I woke up one day and was like, whoa, why am I so unhappy? I did all the things that I was supposed to do. And so I would love like take me back to and maybe like share some of your past of like what got you to the place of deciding to get married and settle down, and then take us on the journey of like what happened after that.
Yeah, that's a big one. I'll kind of give an outline and then we can choose where we want to explore. But I, yeah, being raised in a small conservative town, I knew I really wanted to get out, if you will, for college. And I ended up going to a college that my parents really wanted me to go to. I got a scholarship, and it was a very conservative Christian university where people thought that women were going there to get their MRS degree, misses to get married. And that's not true. So my freshman year, I ended up dating for the first time and married the first person I dated and the first person I kissed, and was a virgin on my wedding night, as all, I don't know, I don't want to say all good Christians are, but that was something that was really encouraged in the community that I was raised in. And I, I think maybe similar to you, I was doing things that were common in the culture that I was raised in. And sometimes before we find our own voice, we just kind of follow someone else's playbook. And I found my own way to color outside the lines. You're given kind of a blueprint, and I would kind of go outside the lines here or here, but I mostly like stuck with the picture. And I believe that the essence of who I am was present in all those ways. I just didn't have a better source of inspiration. I didn't know any differently. And so in some ways, I wouldn't say that my path was necessarily traumatic, because it's all that I was exposed to. And I was being myself in the midst of these parameters. And as I graduated college, I graduated at 21. I got married at 21, moved in with my husband, and we started to build a life in LA. I started to meet people out in the big bad world. And I started to witness very different values or even different beliefs in God or different ways of living life to mine that I couldn't disagree with, because they were the people who were living them were so loving, so giving, the amount of service present, the amount of abundance and beauty in their life. It was like I'm looking at their life and I'm like, I can't argue with this. This is stunning. And really, I think our level of openness to life and what life hands us in the smallest of conversations, in the big decisions, like the chance to be uncomfortable, like maybe it's cold outside and it's raining, but I want to go for a run in the rain because I've never done that. That's a very small example, to like, I'm going to go to another country and live there for 3 months by myself is a bigger version of that. But the willingness to try and be exposed is, I think, the beginning of growth and really like abundance of beauty. And so I feel blessed that because I was married, we had a great relationship and we were great communicators. So there were many things about our partnership looking back that I'm like, oh, those weren't present. But what we did have was a love for each other and the ability to communicate pretty well. And we gave each other permission to become who we wanted to become, because 20s are a pretty formative decade. And I think 20s are an amazing time for really branching out in all directions and then coming into more of a discerned path. And we managed to do that pretty well in our relationship. And I'd say each job I took, because in my career I've taken many like 90-degree or 180-degree turns, switching industries, you know, switching titles. I took a lot of pay cuts just to explore things, being on a team, being on my own, co-founding something with a best friend, contracting, like it's been all over the place. But those explorations and having the backbone of a partner, which is often, you know, financial support, like you can kind of help each other in that. There's a level of emotional support and stability that maybe a lot of people now don't have in their 20s because they're just focused on dating or, you know, more casual relationships, having fun. That really gave me a stepping stone to then experiment. And I'm so grateful for that relationship. You know, my ex absolutely made me the woman that I am today. And I know he'd say the same about my contributions to his life, just by saying, yeah, let's see who we want to be. And you don't have to be the person that I was with 2 years ago or 5 years ago. And we ended up being together for 11 years. So I'd say I saw three versions of him and he saw at least that many versions of me. And that I would say was probably one of the greatest gifts of that marriage.
That was so beautifully said. And you're just such a wonderful example of, because culture, society, whatever you want to call it, tells us that if something doesn't last forever, that it was a failure. And
Yeah.
I think you and I both are a testament to that being so untrue. That people dance in and out of our life for whatever period of time or timeline that is, to support each other. We're there to lift each other up. We're there to shine a light and hold up a mirror and reflect back, like, who do I want to be? Who am I in this partnership? And have I maybe outgrown this? Are we growing in different directions? And there's nothing right or wrong with that. There's actually a ton of beauty in the letting go, in the acknowledging that, like, you made me the woman that I am today. I am so grateful. Thank you for coming into my life and being like the closest person to me. And also, let's recognize that I think now is the time where we set each other free.
I totally agree with the misconception that we are raised with, and that extends to friendships as well. If I so wish that people would talk about friendship breakups in school and how sometimes friendship breakups are more heartbreaking than romantic, you know, love-based relationships. And yeah, we had a beautiful conversation about this the last time we chatted about conscious uncoupling. But you do think about different stages of life, and the childhood friends that I had were not in touch so much anymore. And for me, it's been a beautiful bless and release to honor the memories of who we both were at that time. And it's a beautiful thing when those can circle back around and friends or partners can evolve in the same way, but it's also so unlikely considering a universe of options at our disposal for where we're going to live and how we're going to live and decisions and values. So unlikely. It's very rare, I think, when people grow in the same direction their entire life. And sometimes people kind of contractually agree that we are going to grow the same. And you can see certain couples or even certain friend groups where it's very kind of contained of here's how we do things, don't step outside the box. And for some personality types, I think that really works. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I've just made different choices. And I think you have as well, to continue to grow and be open to not totally reinventing ourselves, but remembering who we are and just continually returning back to being in integrity to that.
Completely. And I love that you said remembering who you are, because I really believe that we have, like, there's that fire or whatever you want to call it that is inside of all of us. And we build up layers, typically like layers of armor over time, and that's for survival, that's for whatever reason that we put those layers on or those masks. And I certainly have, and we wear that hat for a little while, and then the older we get, and I really think that this happens in our 30s, where we start to feel like, I think it's time to lay some of that to rest. I don't need to carry that anymore. And let me peel back some of these pieces of armor that I've built up over time and really like get to know myself again and start to understand, like, what light do I want to shine? Like, what do I want to step into? And have I been keeping myself small? Have I been holding myself back? And I think when we start to like use our voice and we start to express some of that, this was certainly my experience, that not everybody will be comfortable with that. And that's okay. And I love that you brought up the friendship breakup, because I absolutely agree with that. Like, it can be harder than a romantic relationship, especially if you've been friends for a really long time. And I went through that myself as I was going through this, like, discovering and unraveling of my identity and figuring out who I was and remembering who I was, that some friendships, like, they did fall away. And it's a beautiful thing. I still look at those people with so much love of, that was such a beautiful time in my life, and there's nothing wrong with the fact that we're not in each other's life anymore. We can still send each other love and also acknowledge that, like, we helped each other get to this place that we're no longer in. And that's okay. We don't have to grip tight to that version of ourselves that we once were. It's okay to let that go. And I know, like, for me, there was like a pretty big moment, or like moments that sort of led up to me recognizing, like, okay, it's time to make some shifts and changes in my life. And for me, that was motherhood, that was becoming a mom. And it was a very intense, like, visceral shakeup for me, like a total shock to the system. And I feel like most people, it may not be like as intense, but most people like come to this place, whether it's like a slow drip over time or it is a big shake up moment where you decide, like, okay, I think it's time for me to shift gears, or it's time for me to step into this new season or new chapter of my life. And I'm curious, like, did that come up for you? Like, what led you to the place to decide, like, okay, I'm going to make a change in my life?
Yeah. Well, it was around my Saturn return, pretty much like 3 months before I turned 30. And my ex and I had been in a really long, like at least a year of exploring if we were going to stay in the marriage. So there was a series of events, I think, over the 2 to 3 years leading up to choosing to separate, where we hurt each other. I hurt him, he hurt me. We didn't meet each other's expectations. It started to become aware that we wanted different things from life, and the things that I wanted to do weren't so appealing to him. And the way we wanted to spend time, the way we wanted to travel or not travel. And also, I started to meet, I think, some couples who I saw a certain spark between them. I saw a level of admiration and like adoration, so that I could just see they adored each other. And maybe they'd been together 10 years, maybe they'd been together. I was looking more at the ones who'd been together longer than us. And I saw this chemistry and also this very clear adoration. And I just could see that my ex and I didn't have that. And, we'd met at a time where neither of us had much dating experience. It wasn't like we'd been exploring for 5 years and then we found each other. We found each other under these very specific, like a small container. And we both fit all the check marks of what each other needed at that moment. And as began to enter my 30s, and he was already in his 30s, we looked at the people we'd become throughout our relationship together, and we were like, we're kind of worlds apart. And there was a few shakeup moments that caused us to step back and look and actually be able to see, because when you're in day-to-day reality together, it can be very confusing. Like, am I just having an off season? Is he having an off season? Is it this work stress? What is it? But when we were able to pull back, and really going back to the very beginning of our conversation, it was a really firm belief in my spirit that there was more available. So going back to like, there is more, there is more. And I really acknowledged that we had for many people's standards, we had a great marriage. We could communicate, we were respectful, we liked being together, we were great roommates. And yet there was a level of intimacy and adoration and co-partnership. Like, what are we gonna partner on? Is that going to be a house or a family? Is that going to be a spiritual vision? Is that going to be a community initiative? Like, I want to build something with my person. And we couldn't really align. And so we went through a year of therapy and really an exploration so that we could try every possible avenue we knew of to make it work. And to be able to say, if we choose to separate, we want to know that we've done everything we can that we know of to really find a path through, because we have a really solid foundation over these last 11 years. And we chose, my grandfather and some, I guess, elders in my life counseled us to have a year-long separation. And we decided to split up all of our assets before. So we spent December splitting up everything we owned. And that was a very beautiful process, because we decided if we wanted to get back together, we needed to begin dating fresh. And it all had to feel like something new. And then Jan 1, we woke up in the same bed and we said goodbye. And I left the house and moved in with a friend. And that was the beginning of that year of separation. So many things, kind of like lots of little things, but there are those big moments where the earth rattles, and what you choose to do with those moments really makes an impact on the path forward.
Yeah, and I love that you came to a place of deciding to like spend time apart, because I think like it's so easy to decide like we're moving in different directions. We're so different than the version of ourselves that we were when we first met. I think it's time to part ways and to just make that the end. There's so much like, and I think this is a testament to both of you, because I got to know him as well, and a beautiful human, a beautiful man, and just a testament to both of you to decide like, let's physically separate, because there is so much learning that can come from like changing your environment when you are, as you said, just moving through the day-to-day mundaneness of life. It's easy to place blame on certain things. Like, as you said, maybe this is work stress, or maybe it's this or this. But when you do physically like remove yourself, change your environment, it allows you the time and space to like tune back in, to connect back into yourself, to like talk to your intuition, to have conversations with the future version of yourself. What do I want the rest of my life to look like? And I know that you're a very like deep, connected, spiritual person. So a lot of my audience, like a lot of the women, especially listening, and I think that I've just naturally and organically like drawn to me are going through some really big shifts in their life, whether that is a separation from marriage or a relationship or a friendship or wanting to have a family. Like they're in the midst of transition. And so, and I think that you just have a lot of deep wisdom. And I think, like, from that separation, from that place to where you are today, I know that you've like explored a lot and you've tested the waters and you've traveled a ton. And so I would love to hear like what what did you learn about yourself? Like why like was that a really important season for you and like what came up? Like share maybe any sort of insight or lessons or teachings that came up during that time.
Absolutely. I To begin, it was interesting because my ex agreed to the terms of the separation, but he was very much like, this is your idea, and I'm going to go along with it. And about 6 weeks in, we met up. And at that meeting, he said, it's like my world was in black and white, and now it's in color. And I was holding on so tightly to the contract of our marriage that when I let that go, it's like we boomeranged to different planets, and I can't imagine ever coming back to the same planet. And there was such a liberation that I felt in his voice. And he said, we don't need to wait the whole year. We can go ahead and get divorced, which in some ways was nice to hear. And in other ways, I thought, we don't have to run away from each other. Let's take our time. And we actually did. We ended up filing for divorce on a website, and it cost, I think, $300. And that was kind of an ideal scenario. But I think we were able to engage in that experiment of a year separation because of the work we'd done for a year and a half prior, to really try and look at our relationship from all these angles. And so by the time we went into this year of separation, it was an intentional experiment on each of our parts of who are we if we're not the couple. And so for me, I'd never had my own bank account, which is hilarious. I had never lived by myself. And I ended up I ended up looking at an apartment on a Wednesday, applying that afternoon, getting it that evening, moving out on Friday, moving in on Friday with a mattress and a chair. And on Sunday, lockdown began in LA. And this is the first time I'm ever living by myself. And I have a chair and a mattress. And it was fabulous. It was such an experiment. I put a giant drop mat on the floor and had art, and I was making art and hanging up trash as art, and decided that I wanted to try out online dating eventually, and also was in a COVID pod with some friends. And for the first time, I could really choose what I wanted to do with my days without having to tell anyone about it, and also what to do with my money. And just it was a true liberation moment. And around that time, I threw myself an amazing 30th birthday party right before lockdown happened, and just felt so supported by community. And I would say not everyone fully understood why my ex and I made the decision that we did, but they were down to go along for the ride. And I think that's a great requirement of friends. It's like, you don't need to understand why, the ins and outs. You don't have to agree with everything, but do you trust my process? Like, do you trust that I'm in the midst of something that has integrity and meaning, and I'll find my way out? And so around that time, I was in a ceremony and body work. My hands it's like I remembered that my hands knew a language, and that I needed to touch people. And I left that ceremony, and for the next 2 weeks started having friends come over, and I ended up doing like 8 bodywork sessions, started to get paid. I got a massage table. All these things clicked into place. And that's just one of the several avenues in my life that have really opened up post my relationship, because when a core piece of your identity for, however long, for me, it was 11 years, when that identity of wife fell away, there was actually room for new inspiration to come in. And part of that was my, now I'm 800 hours in on training into different bodywork modalities, and had the privilege of working with people all over the world. And it's just one of many beautiful things that have blossomed in my life as a result of clearing out that space.
I love that. That is so powerful. And I'm so not surprised that you've moved into like a healing body work. That just makes so much sense for you. And
Yeah.
I think anybody that knows you, no matter like at what phase of your life, would probably agree with that statement, that like that just makes sense for you. And I think some of us, like, we do have these callings, this like these parts of us that like they just need, yeah, they need space to grow, as you said. And also I think there's some people out there, and I have conversations with women that like have no idea where to begin, that like they've become so attached to that identity piece of wife or of mother or of friend or of a career, like a certain job title, that once they start to question that, once certain like signs or signals from the universe, from God, start to present themselves, they just feel lost and they feel stuck, and they don't know where to begin. And I just, again, I just think you have so much wisdom of like, I would love to hear your thoughts on like, what would you
Mm-hmm.
say to somebody that like really does feel called for what's next, but they're so unsure of like where to even begin?
Yeah. Um, there's a Christian mystic poet named Meister Eckhart who says that everything is meant to be lost, that the soul may stand in unhampered happiness.
Mhm.
And I love that line of everything is meant to be lost, because sometimes we're willing to lose one thing. And it's like, well, I lost my marriage. And for me, it was, I lost my marriage. And then 6 months later, I stepped out of a business I had founded with my best friend for 5 years. So in some ways, the marriage was just the first loss of many other losses. I mean, disappointing my family was a big one. Divorce is not, it's highly discouraged in my family. And um, a lot of the church community that John and I had been a part of, there was just a lot of loss, actually. And sometimes I think we lose one big thing and that's it. But it's really a willingness, if you're going to go all the way to reconnect with the core of who you are, everything has to be willing to fall away. And it's like the untethered soul. We're going after the untethered soul. And so allowing those losses to come, realizing that we can withstand them, that it's something falling away. And in the emptiness of that, either I can fill that with love for myself, and there's support all around us, and really, choosing to look around and see the world through the eyes of love instead of the eyes of fear. Huge task. I think um, everything is either love or a cry for love. And we as humans kind of move through the world that way. We're either giving love or saying, love me. But in terms of, yeah, it's almost inviting in a remembering process. We'll go back to that word. And the willingness to be reborn and to see ourselves through new eyes. And one of my friends said to me, the world does not give us infinite chances, but it can gift us the infinite once we choose.
Mhm.
So there might not be infinite chances to do to make the big decision you need to make, or maybe you wish that there were 5 new career paths in front of you. But I think there's something to finding the beauty in following, for me, like following a path of beauty and a path of curiosity. And so surrounding myself with beautiful things. As I was moving into my apartment and like getting to decorate kind of by myself for the first time, there was a real process of like, what is my style? I don't even know. But then realizing that, oh, I want the scissors I use to be beautiful because I want to have that experience on a day to day basis. Or like, I want the napkins I use to be cotton or linen because I don't use paper napkins. And just this slow, steady curation of beauty in my world and bringing friends little gifts when I travel, or, the gifts of fresh flowers for myself, was a way of starting to relearn who I am, or relearning who we are in social contexts, like talking to strangers and just saying, I'm going to talk to every single person I encounter today, or I'm going to smile at every single person I encounter today. And it really is those little tiny micro decisions. I also 2 years ago started with a best friend of mine a community dedicated to the art of daily practice. And we host morning practice groups 4 times a year where people commit to spending some time with themselves first thing in the morning for 40 days. And the reason we started this was to reconnect with ourselves and to say it's so easy to like wake up, get on the phone, and let the noise of the world rush in. Much harder to wake up and just be with ourselves and tune in, whether through writing, meditation, breath work, dancing, chanting, you name it. And cultivating this practice, I would say probably 75 to 80% of the mornings I wake up and I tune in with myself. And it kind of changes. Some people are really good about sticking to the same practice. Maybe, I don't know if you're one of those people, Dee. But for me, this morning I did some Kundalini spinal stuff and I did some chanting. And that was just my way of tuning in to where I'm at and honoring that and moving forward from there. So I don't know if that answers it, but it's kind of I like this line, where is the life in your life? And sometimes you don't know what you want your life to look like. Like you're like, where am I going to live? What am I going to do? Who's going to be my friend? But you do know, perhaps in the next minute or even in that minute, what is bringing you life? Like what around you is actually sparking life within you. And maybe it's something beautiful, or maybe it's something of interest. Like I've never seen that before. That's curious, or I don't know what that word means. And so just following the thread, the whisper that then becomes a shout, that then maybe becomes a whole new life.
Oh, I love that so much. I am such a believer in, if you like, if you want something for yourself or for your life, like start showing up as that version of yourself in the smallest of ways. And yes, it starts first thing in the morning. It starts the moment you wake up. And it really is like just following those like breadcrumbs. Like it can start so small. As you said, like choosing the pair of scissors that you have in your home. Like I'm the exact same way. Like I want my outward environment to sync up with my inner world. So even if I'm like going through, like I moved out on my own a year, almost exactly a year ago for the very first time. And
Yeah.
woo, yeah, and I was in the depths of grief and of letting go and of release and of allowing that to exist inside of me. And also, I knew that my environment needed to be this place that like I loved being, that I felt inspired by, that I could see the beauty in, so that even though inside I was feeling some like heaviness, that I would remember, or I would have these little reminders of like there's beauty everywhere. And it's what we choose to focus our energy on. And it doesn't
Yeah.
have to be, and like, yes, a sunrise or a sunset, it could be these big, beautiful moments. Or it can be the smallest of like just pouring your coffee in the morning and taking a deep breath. And that, if that smell, like for me, that smell is like one of my favorites. And there's so much
Yes.
beauty in that for me. And slowly over time, like that little ripple effect translates into, yeah, I have these beautiful conversations with strangers when I'm at the grocery store or whatever the like way is. But you can allow that to you can allow that seed to grow and grow and grow until one day, like, I woke up, and for me it took about 6 months, but I had this very vivid moment where where Rebel and I were dancing in our living room, and I felt it in my body and I just started crying, where I just felt like I made it. I'm on the other side. Like I did it. And it took time. It took 6 months, but I chose every single day to, one, like lean into how I was feeling, and also to focus on all of the beauty that was everywhere, no matter what I did. And those, like, I just really believe that, like, that is how we start to find what's next, exactly as you said, like little by little focusing in
I
on. Yeah.
love that you are on the beauty path as well. And I think as women, there's a really feminine part of ourselves that we can honor by following beauty and following pleasure. And that can kind of go against the more masculine, hyper efficient version that a lot of us have had to be to work in certain industries. And so to return to that in a moment where we are already vulnerable, leaving a partnership is a more vulnerable place to be, but to choose femininity and to choose softness, it's like the true test of love is who you are when it ends.
Mm.
And so to be in an ending and to choose to remain tender and to remain open to beauty is such a big quest in and of itself. And as you were just talking about that moment of dancing Rebel, I was just thinking about how many other heartbreaks we're going to experience in this lifetime. And each one is like a testing ground to see how far we've come, the resources we have, maybe the type of community we have. I do hope that the next time my heart is broken for one reason or a next, that I'll have even more exquisite support and mirrors in my life to hold me, and that I can also hold people in that space. And you're so much more equipped to support people in these big life transitions, having been through not just one, you've been through a few. And it's just again, those moments where the whole world is rattling, like, how do we want to use those times?
Completely. And they all, like, I really think that they all happen exactly the way that they're supposed to, in order to like bring, like, help us see our gifts. But we have to, as you said, like remain open to it, because life can, like, one, we always have a choice. And also, like, life can be hard. Like, life does constantly throw these little micro tests our way. And it is up to us to decide, like, how am I going to respond to this? How am I going to move forward? Am I going to soften, or am I going to harden? Am I going to let this, like, kind of like wreck me? And sometimes I think we're meant to be wrecked. Like we're meant to have like a full shakeup. I absolutely needed that. I don't think I would be in the place I'm in today if my whole world didn't crumble to the ground. Like I really needed that sort of like awakening for myself. And then the building that back up is, we get to decide, like, okay, what am I going to bring back in? Like, I get, it's up to me now. And what do I want to lean into? Do I want to like go sit in ceremony and spend more time with myself? Do I want to distract and pick up my phone and scroll all day long? Like, we have the choice. And silencing the noise, I really think is like, it's not easy because the distractions are everywhere. It's constant. And so how do we like find stillness so that we can listen to the voice inside that I really think like is always guiding us at least a little bit. Those whispers are always there. It's just like, have we or can we slow down enough to hear them? And so I'm like, I'm so curious of like, because for me in my own experience, it's been a lot of like plant medicine, it's been a lot of like breath work and meditation and slowing down. And like I know what I absolutely will not do. Like I don't watch the news, I don't tune into that, like I don't allow any of that into my circle, because I know that I need to protect this. And in order to stay open and remain soft and like live from a heart-centered place, like those are the things that like I know I need to do. And I also recognize that it's different for everybody, and the tools and modalities that we all choose um, just depend on what we feel connected to. And I know that this stuff like is valuable for people that are maybe like curious, that maybe haven't like leaned into some of this yet, but they want to know more, or they're figuring out what their thing is. I've done a lot of testing in my own life and experience, so I feel like I've really sort of honed in on like what works for me and what doesn't. I would love to hear from you, like if you're open to sharing, like what are some of the tools that you lean on for answer, or like places you go to for answers, to maybe like hear a little bit more of those whispers so that you are still staying connected to like who you are, and like the woman you're meant to become.
Hmm. You're absolutely right. It is such an individual journey, and there's such a beauty to trying a thousand flavors of self-realization or self, connection to self. And yet the journey never ends, because in different seasons, I think that the fine art is being able to listen to yourself and ascertain which tool would be most helpful at that time. But in a way, tools are all just tools, because it's just us trying to hear the sound of, let's say, our own heart or our own soul, which is very different than the sound up here. I don't know if you've read Untethered Soul by Michael Singer, but he talks about, if the voice in your head were sitting beside you, you'd be like, shut up, you crazy person. Who wants to be your friend? Who wants to listen to you babble all day? So for me, it's really trying to return to the wisdom of the heart and the purity of the heart, because the heart sees with the eyes of love. And so there's actually no judgment in the heart. The judgment's all here. And in there's so much effort, I think, we've had to take to become individuals, to step out of conditioning, and the fight to individuation is so great that then the real lesson becomes how to let all that go. And that's a lesson in humility and being willing to be, the truth needs no defense. And so to just stand tall in the truth and the truth of who you are is really one of the great quests of life. For me, I have, through the course of my training in craniosacral therapy and so many other modalities and sound and trauma-informed plant medicine facilitation, there's been a lot of different things I've studied. And being deep in those spaces has made me more and more sensitive. And I think maybe a lot of, I don't know, I've always thought, well, what if I could have, the ability to touch a body and feel where the pain is, or feel where that is, or be able to hear things, or use the inner eye to see things. And I think everybody has those gifts available to them. And the cost is the willingness to slow down and become very still and become very neutral, and also to become more sensitive. So for me, I was at a Zurich Fest in Zurich last summer, and there were millions of people in the city. And I would usually love a big party like that. It happens once every 3 years. But the smells and the fact that people were hitting up against me for hours and hours, at some point I just became completely overwhelmed and had to acknowledge that this certain environments or things I used to do just don't work for me anymore because I've chosen this instead. And so in some ways, I'm trying to become more and more simple about the tools that I use and to not lean so heavily on them. Because I think the goal is that I wouldn't need any tools. I could just wake up and be that version of myself that is pure heart energy, pure, you could say, like unity consciousness, but just in complete harmony with life itself and the unfolding of my life and all the lives around me. And until that time, I keep doing my practices. I think that my partner right now is much closer to that than I am. I used to get kind of upset with him for not doing a morning practice. And then I realized that his life is the outcome of a morning practice. You know, we use these tools to get us somewhere or to be a happier or more peaceful or more gentle, understanding, compassionate version of ourselves. And he actually just embodies those things. And that's really helped me realize it's not the tool itself. And, you know, I guess I'll speak out of both sides of my mouth because at the same time, there is something so beautiful about a path of devotion and being devoted to something and allowing oneself to become a disciple of a practice, you know, whether that's yoga, kundalini, chanting, like whatever it is, that path of discipline, you know, comes from the word disciple. And I think it's incredible. We're all disciples of something. Maybe it's our social media accounts. You know, we are devoted to our email, for me, like checking my email a lot, and to just contemplate what do we want to be devoted to? And whether it's devoted in the morning or devoted throughout the day, that's always a question I circle back to. This has been a very long-winded way of not telling you any of the tools that I am currently using.
Court, no,
But
it's
I
so.
will say, if I could make a recommendation, I studied with a teacher named Marin Azoff for a year and a half, and she leads a vocal transformation program where you spend a month chanting different seed mantras for each of the chakra centers. So a month on root, a month on sacral, and so forth. And along the way, you learn how to free up the true, authentic expression of yourself through your voice. And you work with different areas of your child development. So, like, root would be, maybe, I'm going to mess this up, but like while you're in the womb to when you're born, sacral is when you're born to age 2. Solar plexus is like ages 2 to 7, when the ego and this little child is individuating for the first time. So you get to explore all that through a daily chanting practice and her lectures. And that absolutely changed my life and the way I communicate. I started singing in front of people, which is even more radical. And she's one of the most gifted teachers. So that's probably the latest thing that I've been hardcore devoted to for a year and a half. So that's my recommendation.
I love all of that. And especially just the emphasis on the tools being a tool. I think now, like with just the world that we live in, which I like feel so grateful to be alive and in existence right now. I think it is a beautiful time to be alive. And also, I think that we have become so hyper focused on just overdoing it, overdoing
Yeah.
it in all aspects of life. And even to the point where I thought that I needed to have this perfect morning routine. And you say morning practice, and I love that. There's like a lot more beauty to that language of having a morning practice. But I would do the same things every single day. And then I woke up one day and I'm like, why am I doing this? Because somebody else because actually not somebody else, a lot of other people told me that I need to have a morning routine. Like that actually doesn't feel fulfilling for me. And I think especially as women, and don't get me wrong, like I love a routine. I love structure and planning and organization. Like that is me. But I think like the like fluid, flowy energy that a lot of women do thrive in, like especially
Hmm.
where we're at in our cycle, like that changes every day. And so for me to wake up and do the same thing every single morning because somebody told me that I that's success, I just I I push that away with like every ounce of my being because that just does not feel true for me. Maybe that's working for certain people and that's great. I just recognize for myself that like I need less. And as you said, like how can we simplify? And that's such a beautiful, like I love that you're in relationship with somebody that like just embodies, just wakes up and embodies all of it.
I
Because
can't even look at his life and say, well, you're stressed out about this. Like, no, he just is in the essence of himself. So, and what you said about the routine is so true because routines can so quickly become mindless. And instead of a routine, like one of my teachers says, use the word rhythm. Like, what is the dance you're doing with life? Like, you are the choreographer, and the great choreographer is the creator of all existence. And so, what are you gonna like? What is your dance today? It sounds like you've reclaimed your dance.
yes, I love that. I've never heard that before. Like, what is the rhythm? Yeah, because, and I think back, I think about like anytime I listen to music, because I think music is such, back to tools, I think it's such a powerful tool to slow us down, to remind us like why we're here, to connect us back to something a little bit like bigger than ourselves, to remember something, to bring back a set like a song or a lyric can really like transport us to a certain phase of our life, and whether that's like being around a specific person or a smell or an environment or a place, like there's so like music has become so such a powerful tool for me. And so I just love that word rhythm because it really does, like we are these rhythmic beings where if we hear a sound like that can instantly slow us down and help us get back into the dance of life and be less rigid about it, be less controlling, and allow like what is meant to exist. Back to like staying open. I think that that is like so important. Whereas if you have this like strict routine or plan for your day, there's no space for the beauty or for the miracle or for the like chance encounter to happen because you're like you have your
Yeah.
blinders and you'll miss it.
You're like a robot. It's very easy to be, completely constrained to our calendars. And in some ways, I love my Google Calendar, and in other ways, I'm trying to remember life before it. And I have a concept that I call God's calendar, where I've started leaving just spaces open in my day, in my week. And I've found that even with some of my bodywork clients, like people will reach out to me the day before and say, I really need to see you tomorrow. And I'll magically have that spot open because God's calendar. So just even the invitation to invite magic into your life by leaving more openness on the calendar is a little way to like pull at that thread of being more awake and aware of the beauty and the mystery and miracles all around.
Mm, I love that. I'm totally going to use that. I think that that's such, yeah, we're at a place where we are at like max capacity, where our calendars are full, like overflowing. Like we can't, I mean, I remember so like in the corporate world of feeling like it was this constant feeling of like always behind. Like I'm always behind. I can never catch up. I'm never gonna like how it feels impossible to get ahead. I can't even like be at an equilibrium. I
Yeah.
can't can't check everything off my to-do list. And that like overwhelmingness of life, like that's where dis-ease comes from. That's where, we show up outside of integrity. We treat the people we love, we take it out on them much more intensely. And we're just not living in like alignment with like who we're really supposed to be. So yeah, how can we create space and room for the magic or for the miracle? And that's such a beautiful way to allow that in. I love that. I'm totally going to steal that from you.
Yeah, you just kind of reminded me of, when we were working together, there was so much beauty in that company and also so much alignment with my personal values that it was so easy for my identity to be caught up in that.
Mm.
And I think my career has been one giant identity loss after the next because it took me 3 or 4 jobs of completely merging who I am with said company or founder or whatever, and then having the disillusionment and the breakup and being like, I don't know who I am now that I'm not running da 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 da. And that process of disillusionment has eventually, I think, stepping into the healing arts space is such a beautiful feminine gift to myself because it's less time on the computer. And this, it's still only part of what I do, but I've noticed that only having one foot in corporate America and having one foot, let's say, in the healing arts space, or, straddling both of these industries, one very masculine, one very feminine, has just really helped me see the obviously like over hyper control that these companies have claimed on people's lives and the amount of stress that I was feeling about, let's say, an email or let's say a deal. But when you think about it, no one's going to die. No, there's not actually serious potential harm that's going to come to anyone if I don't respond to this Slack message tonight. And the amount of the overexertion of stress on my entire body, even something as simple as finding that perspective has really helped me to say, and I think spending more time in other parts of the world where people are not on their computers 80 hours a week and they're in a tiny city center in Morocco and they're the son of a butcher shop. Like they are not stressed in the same way because it's just we're selling people meat and we're helping people get food. And that's what it is. And if we can't do it today, we'll do it tomorrow. And I've just really appreciated, I think, the ability to have more perspective on what is actually stressing me out. And as the world becomes a crazier place, like, is this really the biggest of my concerns right now? Even tonight, I was going to be late for a gallery opening, and I was so stressed about getting here and getting there and getting there. And then I'm like, what is the actual cost of me being 15 minutes late? So we're in an overstressed culture. You're absolutely right. And it's hard to get out of the hamster wheel of allowing things to stir us up. And, our adrenals get fatigued. We do get into, let's say, fight or flight or freeze. Like there are real responses happening in the body. And if we can just, I think be the watcher on the hill, the perspective of what is the actual consequence of this.
Mm.
Is something I'm currently working on when I find, oh, I didn't respond to that email for a week. What's the consequence?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that you brought that up. A place that I've come to lately is, and I feel like I've been having a lot more conversations around this topic too, of like there's always going to be a cost with like no matter what you do, no matter what choice you make, no matter like what season of life you're in, there's a cost to something. And what is like being able to like weigh those out is the best way to determine like what path you want to like how you want to move forward and what path like feels right for you of like, yeah, the cost of this is so minuscule. The cost of this is so small. So why is it eating me up inside? Like, is there something that I just maybe need to communicate? Well, that like relieves some of this feeling that I'm having. And
Mm.
like I think the cost like over time, especially for women, or I'll speak for myself, is like like losing yourself. Like that's like the thing that you want to stay like connected to as much as possible. And I kind of want to like end on this note because I think one, this is like an endless journey of like finding ourselves. I think like that's the human experience is like remembering who we are, finding ourselves, figuring out what's next. I think like if you try to resist that, I think it's sort of silly because I think that that's what we're always like striving towards is getting to know ourselves a little bit more, feeling more in alignment, surrounding ourselves with people that like lift us up. And so I would love to hear from you as a place to sort of like close this out of like what has been your experience in like that homecoming or that remembering of who you are and like what place are you in today like to and maybe just some advice to like offer to anybody listening that may be feeling a little bit lost right now like how how do you stay like as connected or in tune with the person that you are and like staying true to that and to like keep choosing that to like keep leaning into that if that makes sense.
It does. It's a very mystical question. Dear.
I think so many people, like, I think the root of, like, just to expand on this a little bit, I
Yeah.
think the root of a lot of struggle, a lot of like internal struggle is this thought that, like, we're just flailing through life, that this feeling of like, I'm lost. I don't know what's next.
Mm.
I'm unfulfilled. And to like the people that I've met in my life that I really gravitate towards, you being one of them, really exude this like wholeness that like you're not incomplete. You know, there's this idea of like if we're
Yeah.
single, especially because I'm single, I'm like for the first time in my life, I'm this single woman. And there's this idea of like I'm less than, I'm like incomplete because I don't have a partner. And I've never felt more whole than I do today in my entire life. Like and so for somebody that may feel or think that they're like lost, they're like in the midst of that next of like what's coming next, like what has been your experience or maybe some advice that you have for that person so that they like can start to feel like they are this whole being that like they've always been, but maybe to like really feel that inside.
That's actually one of the core principles of a lot of tribal indigenous wisdom and like shamanic wisdom is this concept of wholeness and the concept that we are all whole individuals. And maybe we can't always access that, but there's nothing wrong, if you will. Um, for me, I think there's a real interest in the mystery of life. And I have been choosing a path that's pretty unconventional for some time now. And I have cultivated a willingness to be uncomfortable or in unknown territories. And so for me, there's actually some sort of pleasure and curiosity in getting lost a little bit, not to an extreme extent, but finding ways to come back home is endlessly interesting to me. And so it's not actually a problem to be lost. And I think that's the first thing I would say is it's okay if you can't feel yourself, or it's okay if you have no idea what's next. Like, you know, to be standing like on the edge of a cliff and to not know if you have wings then you're going to soar, or if you have magical vanishing abilities, or if someone's going to catch you on the way down. Like there's so many options. and to, again, allow the mystery, allow things to be revealed. And I'm currently in a lot of unknown about where I'm going to be living, or maybe the various ways where I'm going to be making most of my income, or, is there going to be a family? Is there not? Am I going to have a house? Am I not? There's really so much up in the air. It's been 4 years since my separation, and I am in love. And that doesn't necessarily resolve any of those questions. It's brought up a lot of questions, actually. And so, in some ways, I'm lost in a brand new way. I had a lot of uncertainty when I left my marriage. I'm now in a partnership and I still have a lot of uncertainty. So, the goal is not to avoid being lost or in an unknown space. And the joy is to find joy in coming back to ourselves. And there can be such a pleasurable, like, warm hug feeling in being like, I was in the desert and now I'm home. Because how would you know the difference between the two if you were always home? The fire stops being warm if you have the fire 365 days a year. So, or you go camping for the weekend and you come back and you're like, it's so wonderful to have a toilet. Like, there's so much joy in coming back into a place of comfort and rest and recharging ourselves for whatever expedition is ahead. And a lot of times, if we could take a 5-year view on our life, 5 years ago, I would never have told you I'd be any of the places I am today. I certainly wouldn't think I'd be in Cape Town as I am right now, talking to you in Hawaii. And there's most of the things that are present in my life today were not here 5 years ago, nor could I have known to ask for them. And so that's kind of what I would say to people who might feel lost is there's so much more. We're back to where we began. There's really, can you believe there's so much more than meets your eye as you look around whatever environment you're in? And that part of the reason you're still alive is because you have more to learn and more to experience and more to love. And what a great reason to be alive. What a great reason to be here.
Oh, I love you so much. That's
I love you too.
fun. I could talk to you about this stuff forever. I feel like that
Yeah,
is
we're
a
just scratching the surface,
no,
Dee.
we really are. I want to go and dig deeper, but I feel like that's like a perfect and beautiful place to end and close. And I would love to hear from you. Like, where can people connect with you, find you? Like, what are you working on? Anything that you would love to share? I know that people will be drawn to you the same way that I always have been.
Absolutely. Well, I did finally put all my work together on one website, which is just courtroberts.com, which has everything from my corporate work in experience design, facilitation, offsites, to all the community stuff I host, including the morning practice groups. The website for that is formaforma.co. And we host cohorts 4 times a year. If you want to get reconnected to your morning practice, we'd love to have you join us. And I do body work in LA and Cape Town. So I don't know if any of your listeners find themselves in those places, hit me up and we can drop into some body wisdom, slow time together.
Amazing. I'm excited for the time that when we get to do that together. The next.
We can have it all.
Oh, Corey, thank you so, so much.
Thank you.